Hi everyone, happy Monday. It's Keto 101, and for today I thought we would kind of go over a history, if you will, of keto, or kind of a timeline, so to speak. Because a lot of people think keto is something new, and what is keto? It's just never been around forever, and that's actually not true at all. Keto, or the idea of keto or low carb, has been around since the 1850s. And in fact, in the 1850s, intermittent fasting and a low carb lifestyle was the primary way that we treated epilepsy. And through this, we kind of started finding that fasting and since 1850, we've obviously been studying more and more and learning more and more about what fasting does for our bodies and what low carb food does within our bodies. So in the 1850s, we were using a low carb idea or food source to kind of help regulate cognitive disabilities. And the reason that they liked fasting so much for epilepsy was primarily because fasting does a couple of things for us. And I know we kind of talked about it in one of our last meetings. We had a question about what fasting is and does. And so why it was great for epilepsy is because it does a lot of things. One of them being it fights brain disease. Not only though does it help fight brain disease, it also helps restore or regenerate, and regenerate helps in regeneration. Man, I cannot talk today. But it helps in regeneration of healthy brain stem cells and stuff, whatnot. So fasting has actually done a lot of things. Some of the other benefits that fasting does include that are great for other things is it helps to lower blood pressure. It helps to fight cancers and reduces your risk of cancer. Man, I really cannot talk today. I don't know what's going on. It increases your cell resistance, so it helps you build stronger cells within your body, and it does also help it increases your insulin sensitivity. So a lot of people that are diabetic may like to do fasting too, because again, it's going to help raise your sensitivity to that insulin and help you fight your diabetes a little bit better there. Let's see. Going back though to our timeline and our history of keto, keto kind of started really the first published keto or low carb lifestyle was back in 1864. It was discovered by a man he wrote a book himself. His name was actually William Banting, and back in 1862, William was, to paint a picture, he was 5'5" and he was well over 200 pounds. He was very overweight. He was losing his hearing and he was losing his vision. And he finally decided he was going to do something about it. So he went to a doctor and he started, looking at all these things because he really didn't want to lose his hearing. Being fat didn't bother him, but losing his hearing is what was really motivating for him. So he goes to the doctor, and the doctor tells him, well, your hearing, the reason your vision and your hearing aren't working, because he did go to an ear, throat, and nose specialist, but the reason it's not working is not because of something else, it's because of your obesity. Which was more than likely, yeah, there was something connected there, because it sounded, when I read about William, it sounded to me that he was very diabetic. A lot of his symptoms read diabetes. And so, of course, we know now that a low carb diet and fasting is going to be great for something like that. So William's doctor had him go on a very particular diet regimen there, where he asked him, what do you eat normally in a day? And at the time, William in 1864 he would eat for breakfast. His breakfast was a cup of milk, some tea with milk and sugar, couple pieces of toast, a beer, and it was like just all these like all these crazy carbs. And then later in the day for dinner, it was like 2 pieces of bread, a pastry, a beer, a couple beers, and some meat and some potatoes. So all these different, very heavy, he was eating a very, very heavy carbohydrate diet. So his doctor at the time, and again, this was back in the 1800s. So his doctor at the time told him, okay, well, you need to go on this diet. And so what he did for him, he put him on a very, very specific regimen, which was starting at 9 a.m. with his breakfast. And breakfast was 5 to 6 ounces of beef, mutton, kidneys, boiled fish, bacon, or any other meat except pork or veal. Which, didn't y'all say bacon? But whatever. The things we knew back then, right? So anyway, so breakfast was basically, he had to have a meat, and that was about it. That was just some sort of meat in the morning. And dinner was at 2 p.m. and that was 5 to 6 ounces of a meat of his choice and a vegetable, as long as the vegetable was not a root veggie. So the doctor said, okay, you cannot have potatoes, carrots, beets, any kind of root is a no-go. And so he said, dinner is 5 to 6 ounces of meat, along with your veggies and up to 2 glasses of wine, red wine too. So then that was dinner at 2 p.m. So then they have tea at 6 p.m. because again, this was the time back then. And the place, I think this took place in London, I want to say, is where this gentleman was from. But so it was tea time. And tea time was at 6 p.m. and that was 2 to 3 ounces of fruit, a piece of toast with plain toast, and no milk, no sugar. So just a piece of toast and 2 to 3 ounces of fruit. And your tea, again, with no milk, no sugar, just plain tea. Supper was at 9 p.m. and it was permitted that he could have basically 3 to 4 ounces of meat or fish and up to 2 glasses of wine. So in all of that, they didn't really know at the time, obviously, what they were doing was keto, or like an early version of keto, but basically they were creating a low carb diet. In addition to that, he was also only permitted to eat during particular times. So it was almost like they accidentally started keto and fasting together. But even though he still had so many carbohydrates and so many things like beer and wine that we know now we shouldn't be eating if we're trying to put ourselves in ketosis, but he was able to I lost my train of thought. I hate when I do that. I'm gonna edit this part out. So he was then at 9 p.m. he was permitted to have 3 to 4 ounces of fish and 1 to 2 glasses of wine. So he was still able to do that. And even though it was like all these things, he was still able to have wine. He'd still have, and then also, that's not it. He had a nightcap. He was permitted a nightcap. The timing was not specified, so if it was probably around 9 p.m. or whatever, but his nightcap was a tumbler of gin, whiskey, or brandy with water. No sugar in your water, or nothing sugary to, I guess, mix in your drink. I don't know, I'm not a drinker, so but anyway, so he was permitted up to 2 glasses of wine in addition to the tumbler. So he was still drinking heavily, which we know now that's not really keto. But even in all of his efforts and as much that he didn't do, he still did. He still lost a significant amount of weight, and he was still able to kind of reduce things because he reduced so much of the bread, the beer. He didn't reduce it all, but he reduced it by a significant amount enough. He reduced the pastries and the bread a lot, and he added in meat and took away things like potatoes and root vegetables. So just that effort alone was enough to let him lose weight. So he ended up actually losing, I believe, around 70 pounds before he published his book about eating low carb and how this particular lifestyle helped fix a lot of his problems, because it did help with his issues. While his hearing didn't necessarily restore, it didn't diminish any further, and so he was able to kind of not necessarily reverse things, but stop the progression of a lot of his health decline by changing the way he ate. Later in 1914, we got another book by a non-scientist, almost said Scientologist, by a non-scientist that wrote a book called Eat and Grow Thin. And it was also very much an independent study of, it was actually written by a man whose wife was an actress. And she was always looking for different ways to keep thin and to watch her weight and to, look attractive and healthy. And her husband found, he had read something somewhere in regards to low carbohydrates and started independently kind of searching on his own and came up with a book called, again, Eat and Grow Thin, which promoted a very almost paleo-like lifestyle. It was very similar to keto, but you could have more fruits and natural fruits or sugars and things of that sort. So it was a little more lenient than, say, keto, where you can't have those sugars and starches and whatnot. But it did also, promote like don't eat sugar, starch, baked goods, and that diet really kind of took off and helped a lot of people for a while. However, sometime around just before that, we actually came up with calories and the idea of calories. So around the same time, just before that book was published, other books were published in what kind of we defined, first off, what is a calorie, which it was a scientific study done to determine what a calorie was. It was placed into a special oven and cranked up to a particular temperature to see what the ash rate would be and how quickly. And so that measurement of energy burnt is what determines a calorie. Does that make sense? So, like scientifically, that's how you count a calorie, is how much energy it costs to burn this particular food, and that's how we count the calories. So counting calories became this huge craze, and counting calories was finally a way for us to put down on paper something tangible to track. Okay, so to keep count of, to watch, and it's like, okay, we can approach weight loss now mathematically because we have numbers that we can use to equate food, and if we know how much numbers we have to equate to how much this food is, we know how much we need to burn off physically to burn that food. So that's kind of how they work together in sense. So now we've got calories and we're all trying to burn calories, and so we kind of don't look at a lot of other things for a while in diets and in the diet world. Looking back at the last 70 years, 50 years overall, we really paid attention more to calories than anything else, and calorie counting does not necessarily work. That study that we showed with William, or that we learned about earlier with William, he was doing a calorie intake of roughly 28 to 3,500 calories a day. But even though he was still intaking all these calories, these were healthier calories, I should say, because we know they weren't really healthy because he was drinking a lot. But it was healthier calories than he was consuming, and it was better carbohydrates and less carbohydrates than he was consuming. So we weren't really paying attention to everything once kind of calories came along, and we didn't really pursue much after calories, with the exception of how do we burn calories. So now that we knew food was calories, how do we get that to burn off? So coming up closer to today with keto, back in the 80s, we got a good old buddy, Dr. Kellogg. We talked about Kellogg. We didn't talk about Kellogg yet. Oh my God, I'm gonna back us way the F back to the beginning, because I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole like I do. And I'm gonna talk about the weird conspiracy part, and then I'm gonna talk about today. So we'll talk about Atkins in a minute. First, we're gonna talk about Kellogg, because this is where my crazy person side comes out. So, Dr. Kellogg, let's talk about him, okay? He, in 1923, okay, Dr. Kellogg published a book called The Proper Man's Diet. And the Proper Man's Diet came off of Dr. Kellogg's religious beliefs. He was a hardcore Seventh-day Adventist, and Seventh-day Adventists believed at the time, because again, this is 1923, that he published his book, but he had been working on a lot of other stuff before that. But anyway, so by the time he published this book, though, he's pretty much telling everyone that they need to follow the perfect man's diet, which was not constructed off of anything food scientific related. It's 100% religion based. So again, he was a hardcore Seventh-day Adventist, and if you're not familiar with their beliefs, they are very big on a vegetarian diet. And the reason, though, that they're big on a vegetarian diet is because Dr. Kellogg believed, as many people in the time did, that, and we may giggle here for a minute, whatever, masturbating was wrong. And if you masturbate, you must have a mental condition and you're crazy and you need to be locked up. Masturbating is like no go. Anything sexual really needs to be suppressed. And so if you're having thoughts about masturbating, according to Dr. Kellogg, you need to suppress that. And the best way to do that is with a high carbohydrate diet that's going to slow you down, because they believed at the time eating iron rich foods, meats, protein, that actually increased your sexual appetite. And so they wanted to suppress that. So eating healthy meant that you were going to have a healthy sex life, and they didn't want that. And they knew that. They kind of knew, like, okay, we got to, like, what is, like, the best way we can suppress people? And it gets interesting to me because it speaks volumes to the power of influence. So Dr. Kellogg formed a group, and amongst this group were other Seventh-day Adventists who were hardcore believers in a vegetarian lifestyle and to suppress masturbation. One of these influencers was Walter Willett, who at the time was a medical professional, and he was a doctor. He was actually head of the department for Harvard. And so, head a doctor for the head of Harvard, you must be pretty smart, right? I'm sure you wouldn't let your religious beliefs intertwine with your scientific beliefs, right? Because you're a doctor, you're studying, but no, that's not at all the case. So by the time we get to the 50s, and when we're not quite the 50s, but a little before that, when we start coming up with the food pyramid, we have this group of influential doctors now that are all Seventh-day Adventists promoting this lifestyle, not because of its scientific research to back it up, but because of our religious views. And now we don't only have religious views that are going to start taking place, but we're also going to have government views taking place as well. Because what happens is, or what happened, I should say, is that Mr. Willett, Atkins, and his group of influential people got together and approached the government and said that, there needs to be a formal blueprint or a guide, if you will, or a pyramid, which My craziness is like, how appropriate that it's a pyramid. If anyone knows me personally, you guys know I'm obsessed with cults, and I do a cult podcast, and it's just all like, And so, anyways, going back to the other conspiracies around our food pyramid and why it is the way it is because Atkins, he was a smart, not Atkins, I'm sorry, Dr. Kellogg, he was a smart guy. So he went into raising corn, and he's most known for cornflakes, which is a very, very popular thing today. And Kellogg's is a huge brand that we don't think about. I know I never, as a kid, I certainly didn't know this growing up, and I loved cornflakes. So he went into the corn business. I want to say that Mr. Willett went into soy products or wheat, and another influencer went into sugar. And so these are our biggest agricultural influences and money makers. So Dr. Kellogg knew who to go to and who to influence to get his ideas into our government's food pyramid plan. He was the one that introduced this idea of a food pyramid and giving our people something to go off of. It was also to construct it at a time where we were kind of coming back from, we were getting into a point of mass production with our food, and so it was, and not everyone was operating ethically, and so a need was there already to produce quality food. And so now the government has this group of doctors, these Seventh-day Adventist group of doctors that are telling them, we've wrote the diet for the perfect man. We know how men should eat. Let us go ahead and do this for you. Let us help you. We're a group of science, doctors that really just want to see people living their healthy life. So they wrote the food pyramid. And if you look at the food pyramid, which again has zero scientific research in it to determine this is what each person needs, the bottom of that food pyramid and the thing that we say you need the most is corn and wheat and grains. And what are you gonna, corn and wheat are not good by themselves. They're not. You ever eat just plain stuff made of corn and wheat? It's not delicious. Cornflakes by themselves were not good. They needed sugar. So sugar had to be added into those two equations. And so now, look how big Kellogg's is. Kellogg's is one of the biggest household names. It's a multi-million-dollar company, as is the sugar company, as is the wheat industry. There's a great documentary, and again, I know I sound like a crazy person right now. There's a great documentary, though, called What the Wheat, and it's on Prime. I believe it's still on there streaming. I recommend you watch it. It's not in regards to keto or low carb, but it's in regards to our food supply system and in the wheat that's grown. We make so much wheat here in America. We make enough wheat to feed 25% more than the population we actually have. So if you watch this video or this documentary and you see all the different ways that we've modified wheat, wheat does absolutely nothing for us health-wise. There's nothing scientifically to show wheat as being good for us today. It's been so genetically modified. So I mean, wheat today has no place in our system, and it really wreaks havoc in our food system. And so we have this food pyramid system that is kind of messing us up because it's based off corn, and we're telling our schools and our public and our children, you need a good amount of corn and wheat, then only a little bit of veggies and meat. Fats are at the top. But why do we eliminate fats? I don't understand. I'm genuinely when we thought of the food pyramid, why did we ever think fats were bad? But then I realized it goes into another study, and it's a lot of, I know I feel like a crazy conspiracy, I sound like a crazy conspiracy theory person, but it goes into pharmaceuticals and, again, money, because these lifestyles as of now have been, not only now, but there was another study done. Where's my notes? There was another study done just before Dr. Kellogg had published his book, and the study was about indigenous people and how they eat. And there was a book and a study done, published about Eskimos in particular, and how Eskimos only eat animals, but they eat all of the animal. They don't waste anything. They eat the fat and blubber. And that actually, Eskimos actually showed very, very healthy lifestyles. So there was a study done on indigenous people and how they're eating naturally and clean and just animals and just, meat and fats, or protein and fat. I shouldn't say animals, that's terrible. But they were just eating protein and fat, and they didn't waste anything, and they were living very happy, very healthy lives. So, and I say very healthy because there's not a lot of diseases going on, whereas our food system has constructed so many diseases at this point. Diabetes is definitely a man-made disease, and it is a billion-dollar industry because there's so much money for big pharmaceutical companies to be made off insulin, and for doctors to push certain things. The doctor that actually okayed Dr. Kellogg and the group, or the people responsible, I should say, for approving Dr. Kellogg as being the ones to come up with our food pyramid, him and his group to come up with our food pyramid, he was paid off. He was given a large sum of money to be able to do this. And so it's like, well, we're all people, like anyone can be influenced, anyone can be told. It's just who you get to, Anyways, that's my crazy people talk. Back to what we were actually talking about, though. And let's see, we talked about that one, Okay, so anyways, food pyramid. I just agree with it. Oh, fat. We were talking about fat. Okay, so fat, though, why is fat at the very top in this tiny little bit? Because fat, to me, is one of the most natural things that we eat. I mean, for me, I think about when we're born. That's pretty much the only thing we eat. When we're first born, when we're infants, we're fed breast milk or some other type of milk if our moms don't breastfeed us. But I mean, the most natural thing is breast milk, which contains fats. And so, and our brain is 60% fat. So why would we ever think to minimalize the one thing that is a big part of our body? We know that 70% of our body is water, so we know we have to replenish our water. Why don't we have to replenish our fat? Anyways, that's my idea. That's my thought. So that's my 2 cents and history on keto and some of the conspiracies and whatnot. I did want to talk to you, though, because I feel like there's so much out there about the different types of keto. So like our Eskimos, we have, of course, the carnivore type of keto. There's, I'm going to name off like 5 different types of keto right now. At the end of the day, it's whatever you want to do that keeps you in ketosis. Because we talked last week on how keto is not a diet. Keto is a state that we put our metabolism into, and there are certain foods that we can eat to promote us protecting that state that our metabolism is in, right? So any kind of food you eat that's going to be low carb or keep you in keto is keto. But there's a lot of people, though, that do different styles of keto. I'm very intuitive when I eat, and I really do try to stop and ask myself, what am I hungry for? What do I really want right now? What do I feel like I'm craving? And sometimes it'll be like, you know what? I really want a hamburger right now. Maybe I need some protein. Or maybe I'm really wanting, I know I use sweets and dehydration as an option a lot, but maybe if I'm really wanting sweets, maybe I am dehydrated, and I'll ask myself when I went to the bathroom, how clear was my pee? How thirsty, if I drink something right now, how thirsty am I? So I do try to check in with myself and try to intuitively eat. I have found just naturally that I tend to follow an OMAD style or carnivore. I'm like an OMAD/carnivore. And so what that means is carnivores tend to eat primarily meat. A lot of times for dinner, I will just eat meat, no vegetables. Maybe I'll bake some chicken and bake a bunch of chicken, and then I'll eat 1 or 2 pieces and then put the rest in the fridge for later. But I eat just meat, and I keep all the fats. I keep all the fats. I always buy the fattiest cuts of meat that I can, and I eat it. I eat all the fats. Another option that people tend to do is Whole30. Whole30 is not my favorite because I know it involves a lot of fruits, and I think of Whole30 as something closer to a paleo style, which I believe, I haven't looked 100% into paleo, but I know it's also very low carb and very natural with the addition of fruits, is my understanding of a paleo lifestyle. Again, OMAD is like what I do, which is 1 meal a day. And that's just something I've naturally kind of progressed to, because for sure, when I first started keto, I was breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, every meal. But now I've just kind of gotten used to checking with my body, and it's like, oh, am I hungry right now? And I find like I'm not hungry as often now as I was, for say, when I started keto. Of course, too, a lot of people wonder about being vegan or vegetarian and if they can do that while being keto. And I know there's been a lot of recent updates in regards to vegetarians and the health benefits that they have. And you can be a vegan and you can be a vegetarian and still follow a ketogenic lifestyle. Again, you're gonna have to work harder. That's just all there is to it. Is it possible? Yes. Is it harder? Yes. Is it more restrictive? Yeah. And that's why it's harder. So for me, I find things that are restrictive to be too hard. I also don't have that like, oh, I don't want to eat animals. No, I love my meat. Sorry. But I mean, if you want to be a vegetarian, but know what substitutes you're gonna have to make. I would find it personally much easier to be vegetarian than vegan, especially if you're gonna allow yourself to eat eggs, because eggs are probably gonna be a big source of your protein. Again, I'm not a vegetarian, but if you or someone you know are, and you guys have your proteins, and because it's basically proteins and fats. So there are plenty of fats within vegetarian ways and plenty of protein. So there's nuts, there's avocados, fruits like avocados that are healthy and still fat friendly, oils, coconuts. So there's so much that I'm sure you can find to snack on. It's the effort you're willing to put into that. I'm not willing to put in an effort to doing that much and being vegetarian, but I am willing to put up the effort to put no sugar, and to substitute my sugar, which is the next and last kind of keto diet that I've heard of, which is NSNG, which stands for no sugar, no grains. So people may still eat fruit, or not fruit, excuse me, but you may still eat rice, I guess. That wouldn't be an example. That'd be a grain. How dumb. I don't know what carbs you would actually eat on that. No sugar, no grains, which is, I don't know, I guess it's maybe more lenient, but I can't think of anything that doesn't fall into keto that's got sugar or grains right now. But anyways, like I said, I just try to always be, in the beginning especially, conscious of my net carbs. How many net carbs am I eating? How many net carbs are in this meal? And is it going to be, still within my, like when I first started, I started at 35 net carbs a day. I was like, I'm going to go ahead and allow myself 35 net carbs. And I gradually, by the first year, dwindled down to about 20 net carbs per day. And at this point, I really just, I feel that it's so intuitive for me. And it's become such habit that I don't track anything anymore. I just know that I'm going to live low carb. And one thing too, that going back to our history lesson, one of the first studies that we had there with the Eskimos, the doctor that actually performed the study, he did something and proved something that was really, really important, and not just to keto, but to any diet you choose. If you're going to be a vegetarian, you're going to be a pescatarian, whatever it is you're going to be, paleo. it's lifelong. It's like a lifetime thing, okay? And it needs to be. And in his study, he showed he followed the diet himself for 5 years while studying indigenous people. And he actually lost weight, never gained weight. And everyone was like, but you ate all the fat. He's like, yeah, I did. So it showed, though, what was my point I was trying to make with that? So he actually, though, proved a really good point, and he went through and did this study for 5 years and came back and said after the 5 years he started gaining weight and said this has to be a lifelong thing. Once you change how you eat, you're going to change your body. And it's very true. You have to know that this is going to think of this as a lifelong thing. You know, your health is forever. You can't just take care of it for a little while and then expect it to be good forever. Your health is a lifelong journey. And keto is not a weight loss thing. It's a health thing. So you have to really think of it as I am doing this for my health. I am doing this as a way to manage and control my metabolism and my weight. So, and you know, once you let that go, you have to know you're going to lose that control. So that's my lesson, though, for today. I think that's really all I had to go over with you guys. But I felt like today was a fun one because I got to go over my conspiracy theories that are crazy. Anyway, I hope you guys all learned something good, and I'm looking forward to seeing and talking to you all tomorrow night in our Keto 101. Bye, guys. Have a great rest of your week.